Have you ever wondered what turns a warm heart cold? It wasn't finding shady texts or hidden hotel receipts. It was standing in a hospital hallway smelling of bleach, holding my convulsing 7-year-old son, and realizing my husband was gone. He wasn't getting a doctor. He was 2 rooms down, hugging his mistress's daughter, begging nurses for priority. In that exact second, our marriage didn't just die. It became a death sentence, and I was the executioner. Hello, wonderful listeners of Violet Revenge Stories. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled our channel's monetization, leaving us with zero budget to keep operating. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so our team can cover their living expenses and continue creating the content you love. You can easily support us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link in the description and pinned comment of this video. My name is Nora Harris. I am 34 years old, and my entire life was built on the foundation of logic. As a senior systems engineer at Nexus Cloud Dynamics, a major virtual tech conglomerate based right here in Seattle, I spent my days analyzing complex architectures, anticipating failures, and building redundancies. In my world, if an equation is balanced, the system runs smoothly. I believed the exact same principle applied to marriage. You put in trust, hard work, and absolute loyalty, and you get a secure, loving home in return. I was the financial pillar of our family, the steady, predictable anchor that allowed my husband to chase his ambitious dreams without fear of a safety net. Julian was my complete opposite, and for a long time, I thought that was exactly why we worked so incredibly well together. He was a charismatic visionary, a man who could walk into a crowded room and instantly make everyone feel like they were the most important person there. He was the founder of a flashy tech startup, always pitching ideas, always networking, always on the verge of the next big financial breakthrough to the outside world, and especially to our neighbors in the idyllic, manicured suburb of Pinecrest. We were the picture of the perfect modern American couple. We had the sprawling house, the 2 luxury cars in the driveway, and a seemingly flawless life. At the center of our universe was our 7-year-old son, Leo. He was a bright, gentle boy who loved building intricate block cities on the living room floor. But Leo was fragile. He had been diagnosed with a mild immunodeficiency disorder early on. While other children brushed off a common cold in a matter of days, a simple virus could send Leo's immune system into a dangerous overdrive, resulting in sudden, severe spikes in his body temperature. Because of this, my maternal instincts were always functioning on high alert. Looking back now, I realized that my intense focus on Leo's health and my demanding career created the perfect blind spot. Over the past several months, Julian had become increasingly absent from our lives. He was leaving the house before the sun came up and returning long after I had put Leo to bed. Whenever I asked him about his schedule, he had the perfect, pre-packaged excuse ready. His startup was entering the critical Series A funding round, a demanding phase that required endless meetings, client dinners, and late nights at the office with his co-founder, Elena. I wanted to be the supportive wife. I constantly told myself that his ambition was for our family, that the sacrifices we were making right now would secure Leo's future. But complex systems rarely fail without issuing warnings first. The red flags started out small, easily rationalized by a tired, trusting mind. First, it was his phone. Julian had always kept it unlocked, tossed carelessly on the kitchen counter while we cooked dinner. Suddenly, there was a new, complex passcode, and the device never left his pocket. Then came the laundry. Sorting through his clothes one Sunday afternoon, I caught the faint, lingering scent of an unfamiliar, heavy floral perfume clinging to the fabric of his suit vest. When I mentioned it, he laughed it off smoothly, saying he had been stuck in a crowded elevator with an overzealous investor. The final anomaly was the money. Managing our finances, I noticed several large, unexplained cash withdrawals from our joint checking account, hundreds of dollars disappearing into thin air. He claimed they were for last-minute business lunches and cash tips. waving away my concerns with his signature charming smile. I chose to ignore the warnings. I chose to believe the man I married. That fragile illusion shattered completely on a freezing, brutal night in mid-February. A massive snowstorm had blanketed Seattle, trapping the city in a gridlock of white ice. It was past midnight when I heard a strange, choked sound coming from Leo's bedroom. I threw off the heavy blankets and sprinted down the hall. I found my 7-year-old son thrashing violently on his bed. His small body was rigid, his eyes rolled back so far I could only see the whites, and his lips were turning a terrifying shade of blue. He was convulsing. I grabbed the digital thermometer, my hands shaking so violently I could barely read the display. It flashed 104.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Panic, raw and suffocating, seized my throat. "Julian!" I screamed, the sound tearing through the quiet house. "Julian, get in here right now!" He stumbled into the room, his eyes wide with apparent shock. There was no time to wait for an ambulance in this weather. "Grab him," I ordered, stripping off Leo's heavy pajamas. "Carry him to the car. We have to get to the emergency room immediately." I wrapped my convulsing boy in a thin sheet, the bitter cold of the storm outside completely forgotten as Julian carried him out the front door. I did not know it then, as I held my dying child in the back seat of our speeding car. But the violent storm raging outside was absolutely nothing compared to the devastation waiting for me at the hospital. The emergency room at Seattle General was a sensory assault. The automatic doors slid open, and a wall of sterile chemical smells hit me. A sharp mixture of bleach and metallic blood. Harsh fluorescent lights glared overhead, making everyone look pale and sick. The air vibrated with a chaotic symphony of distress. Heart monitors beeped in rapid, frantic rhythms. Rubber-soled shoes squeaked aggressively against the linoleum floors as medical staff rushed past. Telephones rang off the hook, and a voice over the intercom called out medical codes I did not want to understand. I bolted through the entrance, carrying my convulsing son against my chest. Leo was completely unresponsive, his small jaw clamped shut in a terrifying spasm. I had to force my fingers between his teeth, fighting the immense pressure of his seizure to prevent him from biting his own tongue. My knuckles ached, slick with his saliva, but I held firm. "Help me!" I screamed, my voice cracking under the immense weight of my terror. "My son is having a severe febrile seizure. He has an immunodeficiency disorder." Within seconds, a triage team descended upon us. A nurse in blue scrubs grabbed a gurney, instructing me to lay him down flat. "I need his medical history and your insurance card immediately, ma'am," she said, her voice commanding and brisk, as she strapped a blood pressure cuff around his violently shaking arm. Another nurse was already preparing an intravenous line. "My husband has the insurance card," I choked out, gasping for air. "He has the wallet." I spun around, expecting Julian to be right behind me, ready to hand over the documents, ready to hold my hand, ready to tell me our boy was going to survive. But the space behind me was completely empty. There was just a wet trail of melted snow from our boots, leading back to the sliding doors. I blinked, my exhausted brain struggling to process the visual information. Where was he? Did he go? Park the car? Did he run to the front desk to get help? The nurse demanded the information again, louder this time. I rattled off Leo's medical identification number from memory, reciting his entire pediatric history while my eyes darted frantically around the crowded waiting area. There was no sign of Julian's dark winter coat. "We are taking him to bay number 3, a tall doctor announced, taking control of the gurney. "Mom, you need to stay out here in the hall while we stabilize his airway." They whisked Leo away, the curtain of bay number 3 swishing shut behind them. I was left standing in the middle of the corridor, completely isolated. My whole body began to shake uncontrollably. Cold sweat drenched my back beneath my sweater. I rubbed my arms, trying to generate some heat, but the chill was radiating from my bones. I needed Julian. I needed the man who promised to protect us. I pulled out my phone, but my hands were trembling so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I called his number. It went straight to voicemail. Panic morphed into a desperate, frantic need to locate him. He must have gotten lost in the chaos. He must be wandering the halls, looking for us. I took a deep breath, forcing my legs to move, and began walking down the long, sterile corridor. I peered into every waiting section, scanning the faces of exhausted parents and injured patients. As I approached the intensive care bays, a sharp, familiar sound cut through the ambient noise of the hospital. It was a high-pitched, hysterical sobbing. The crying was coming from bay number 5. I slowed my pace. The heavy fabric curtain of bay number 5 was pulled shut, but there was a narrow 2-inch gap where it failed to meet the wall. I did not mean to look. I was just a desperate mother searching for her missing husband. But as my eyes caught the movement inside that room, my feet stopped completely. My breath caught in my throat. Through that narrow sliver of space, I saw Julian. He was not running down the halls searching for doctors to save our son. He was sitting on the edge of a hospital bed, his broad shoulders hunched over defensively. In his arms, he held a little girl. It was Mia, his business partner Elena's 6-year-old daughter. The child's face was swollen, her skin flushed red with hives, an oxygen mask strapped to her face. She was clearly suffering from a severe allergic reaction to peanuts, something I knew she had struggled with since infancy. Julian was rocking Mia back and forth, pressing frantic kisses into her messy hair, but that was not what made the blood drain entirely from my face. It was the woman standing right beside him, Elena. She was weeping uncontrollably, her face buried deeply into the collar of Julian's coat. His free arm was wrapped tightly around her waist, pulling her close, holding her with a fierce, intimate protectiveness that husbands reserve only for their wives. I stood frozen in the hallway, an invisible spectator to a devastating family portrait. My brain, the logical engine that always sought to solve complex equations, violently rejected the data it was receiving. It made absolutely no sense. Why was he here? How did he know they were here? Then, the final piece of the system crashed. An older doctor walked into bay number 5, holding a chart. He looked directly at Julian. "Dad," the doctor said, his tone sympathetic, "we have pushed the epinephrine. The anaphylaxis is subsiding, but we need to keep her under observation for the next 12 hours. You and your wife caught it just in time." Julian did not correct him. He did not flinch. He just nodded, letting out a heavy sigh of relief, and kissed Elena's forehead. In that precise fraction of a second, the universe as I knew it ceased to exist. I expected my heart to shatter into a million jagged pieces. I expected to fall to the floor, to scream, to tear the curtain open and demand answers. I expected the burning agony of a betrayed wife. But the agony never came. Instead, a profound, absolute zero temperature swept through my veins, the heat of my panic, the terror for my son, the desperate love for my husband. It all evaporated, replaced by a dark, suffocating ice. My heart did not break. It froze completely solid. I did not make a single sound. I did not shed a single tear. I slowly backed away from the gap in the curtain, with perfect, deliberate precision. I turned on my heel and walked silently back down the corridor toward bay number 3. My son was fighting for his life, and my husband was busy playing father to his mistress's child. The time for panic was over. By the time I walked silently back to bay number 3, the immediate crisis had passed. The intravenous fluids and antipyretics had finally done their job. The terrifying rigidity in Leo's small body had relaxed. His temperature had dropped to a manageable level, and he was sleeping soundly. I pulled a plastic chair to the edge of his bed, holding his fragile, pale hand, listening to the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Nearly 45 minutes later, the curtain was aggressively yanked back. Julian rushed into the room, panting slightly, his face twisted into a flawless mask of frantic, breathless concern. His dark winter coat was unbuttoned, and he smelled faintly of the freezing snow outside, though beneath it, I could still detect the sickeningly sweet trace of Elena's heavy floral perfume. I am so incredibly sorry, honey, he breathed, gripping my shoulder tightly. I had zero cellular signal out in the main lobby, and I had to run completely outside the building to call my parents and let them know what was happening. Is our boy okay? What did the attending doctor say? I looked down at the hand resting on my shoulder. It was the exact same hand that had just been wiping away Elena's tears 2 rooms down. The urge to scream, to slap him across the face, to drag him into the hallway and expose his sickening lies was immense. But the ice that had frozen my heart in that corridor kept me completely anchored. I did not flinch. I did not pull away. I leaned my head against the cold hospital wall, playing the role of the exhausted, traumatized mother to absolute perfection. "He is stable now," I whispered, keeping my vocal tone utterly flat and devoid of suspicion. "The fever broke. The doctor said we can take him home in about 2 hours." Julian exhaled loudly, a performance of profound relief, and kissed the top of my head. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness swallow my disgust. We brought Leo home just as the pale winter sun was beginning to rise over Seattle. Julian, playing the part of the devoted but exhausted breadwinner, immediately collapsed into our king-sized bed, his breathing shifting into heavy snores within minutes. I made sure Leo was tucked safely into his room, double-checking his digital thermometer one last time. Then, I walked silently down the hall into my home office and locked the heavy oak door behind me. I sat down at my custom dual-monitor workstation. Julian was a charismatic salesman, but he was absolutely clueless about network architecture. He thought changing his 4-digit phone passcode was enough to keep secrets from a senior systems engineer. He was a fool. Every single device in this house, from his personal laptop to his synchronized tablets, routed directly through the network infrastructure I had built. I booted up my system. Within 20 minutes, I had bypassed his basic cloud encryption using a backdoor access protocol I had installed on our router months ago for bandwidth optimization. I did not just knock on his digital front door, I blew the entire house off its foundation. I mirrored his hard drive to my secure server and began parsing the raw data. The truth did not trickle in. It violently flooded my screens in a tidal wave of betrayal. I uncovered hidden email aliases and highly encrypted messaging applications. Julian and Elena had been sleeping together for over 2 solid years. I scrolled through 2 entire years of hotel booking confirmations, romantic weekend getaways disguised as tech conferences in Silicon Valley, and thousands upon thousands of explicit text messages. But the most sickening revelation was not the physical infidelity, it was the emotional disparity. I opened encrypted folders filled with hundreds of high-resolution photographs of Mia. There were pictures of Julian attending her afternoon ballet recitals, Julian buying her custom-made dresses for her birthday, Julian researching top-tier pediatric allergists across the state. While my own son suffered through severe fevers and terrifying immune drops, my husband was busy playing the doting, fiercely protective superdad to another woman's child. Mia was treated like absolute royalty, while Leo was nothing more than an inconvenient afterthought. The emotional betrayal was profound, but as a systems engineer, I knew emotions were just surface-level alerts. I needed to dig into the back-end infrastructure of this affair. I needed to follow the money. I ran a brute force script to access his private banking portals and cross-referenced the outbound transfers with public county property records. When the data finally compiled, my blood ran completely cold. 4 months ago, Julian had taken out a massive second mortgage on our Pinecrest home. The amount was staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars, legally bound to this property, authorized by a signature that looked exactly like mine. He had forged my name on the loan documents, likely using a bribed digital notary. The money from that fraudulent mortgage was not going into his technology startup. The digital trail led directly to an offshore joint account held by him and Elena. From there, the funds were systematically siphoned off every single month to pay for Mia's elite private school tuition in downtown Seattle and a highly exclusive, out-of-network specialty clinic for her severe allergies. He was literally stealing my son's inheritance, draining the equity of the home I had paid for, to finance a life of luxury for his mistress's daughter. I sat back in my leather chair, staring at the glowing numbers. I thought I had found the very bottom of his depravity, but Julian had dug even deeper. Sifting through a hidden folder labeled with a generic administrative title, I found digital copies of our family's premium health insurance policy. I opened the document, my eyes scanning the official list of covered dependents. There was my name, there was Leo's name, and right beneath Leo, officially listed as a biological daughter, was Mia. Julian had committed a severe federal crime. He had used our premium family policy to register Elena's child, committing blatant, undeniable medical insurance fraud just to cover her expensive epinephrine auto-injectors and emergency room visits. The emergency treatment Mia received tonight in Bay Number 5, the very doctors Julian was begging for priority, were all paid for by the insurance premiums deducted directly from my hard-earned paycheck. A normal woman would have printed these horrific documents, stormed into the master bedroom, and thrown them directly in her husband's sleeping face. She would have screamed, cried, and demanded immediate answers. But I was not a normal woman anymore. I was a system administrator looking at a catastrophic, hostile breach, and my only objective now was total containment and complete eradication of the threat. Moving with cold, mechanical precision, I methodically downloaded every single file, every text message, every forged bank document, every photograph, and every fraudulent insurance form. I partitioned the massive data dump and saved it onto 3 separate, heavily encrypted external hard drives. I hid one in a hollowed-out book in my office, packed the second one into my emergency travel bag, and uploaded the third directly to a secure, untraceable offshore cloud server. I sat in the dark glow of my monitors, listening to the muffled, oblivious sound of my husband snoring down the hall. I slowly closed the laptop, the screen going pitch black. For the very first time since this nightmare began in that hospital corridor, a genuine, chilling smile spread across my face. Julian thought he was a mastermind, playing a clever, high-stakes game behind the back of his boring, predictable wife. He had absolutely no idea he had just handed his executioner a fully loaded weapon. The game had just truly begun. 72 hours after the incident in the emergency room, I took a personal day from Nexus Cloud Dynamics. I drove into the heart of downtown Seattle and walked into the pristine, glass-walled corner office of Victoria Vance. Victoria was not just a family law attorney. She was a notoriously ruthless corporate litigator who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. She did not handle amicable, peaceful separations. She handled total, scorched-earth annihilations. I sat across her massive mahogany desk, looked her dead in the eye, and handed over the encrypted flash drive containing every piece of evidence I had harvested. She plugged it in, reviewed the forged mortgage documents and the fraudulent insurance filings, and immediately brought in a private forensic financial investigator. I told them I wanted the structural integrity of my husband's entire existence completely dismantled. While Victoria and her team began sharpening the legal guillotine, I turned my attention to the very foundation of Julian's impending wealth, his startup. He and Elena were pitching a revolutionary predictive resource allocation software, boasting about an algorithm that could save major corporations millions in operational costs. I needed to see exactly what they were selling. It took me less than 48 hours to bypass their amateur security protocols and breach their staging environment. As the raw source code populated my secondary monitor, a sickening, visceral wave of realization washed over me. The brilliant, innovative algorithm driving their entire platform was not a product of Julian's genius. It was not written by Elena. It was written by me. 3 years ago, during my maternity leave with Leo, I had built a complex scheduling architecture as a personal side project to keep my coding skills sharp. I had left the raw files on our shared home desktop. Julian had literally stolen my intellectual property, wrapped it in a flashy graphical user interface, and was using my brainpower to aggressively court venture capitalists for a $5 million Series A investment. By the end of the week, the forensic investigator finally cracked the ultimate objective of their startup, exposing an endgame that was a masterpiece of financial cruelty. Julian and Elena were not just planning to get rich, they were planning to completely ruin me. Their strategy was meticulously evil. Once that $5 million investment officially cleared their corporate bank accounts, Julian was going to file for a hostile, heavily contested divorce, because he had so cleverly disguised the massive, forged home mortgage as a series of legitimate business loans tied to my name. The crushing debt would fall squarely on my shoulders. Their plan was to force me into immediate bankruptcy, seize our beautiful Pinecrest home in the foreclosure process, and leave me utterly destitute. They wanted me fighting for custody of a chronically ill child with absolutely zero financial resources. While they built a tech empire on my stolen code and my stolen equity, to execute my counterstrike flawlessly, I needed Julian to feel completely safe. I had to become the ultimate, blindingly loyal American housewife. It was the most exhausting psychological performance of my entire life. When Julian came home at 2 a.m, reeking of cheap whiskey and Elena's heavy floral perfume, I did not scream. I greeted him with a warm smile and a plate of reheated dinner. I hosted extravagant, cozy dinner parties for his prospective investors, pouring expensive wine, serving perfectly roasted lamb, and playing the role of the charming, supportive spouse. I even started waking up at 5 a.m. to prepare elaborate, home-cooked lunches. I packed them into neat, labeled containers. "You work so incredibly hard for our family, darling," I would say softly, kissing him on the cheek as I handed him the bags. "Make sure you and Elena take a break to eat something." Every single time he looked at me with that fake, appreciative smile, calling me his rock, I stared right back, hiding a venomous, calculating rage behind perfectly calm eyes. Behind the domestic facade, I was a ghost operating in the machine. Victoria guided me through the complex legal labyrinth of shielding my assets. I quietly liquidated my independent stock options, cashed out my individual retirement accounts, and transferred every single available dollar into anonymous, ironclad trust funds established exclusively for Leo. Julian would never be able to touch a single penny of my actual wealth. But the financial maneuvering was merely defensive. I needed an offensive strike, and the stolen software was my weapon. Because Julian was a charismatic fraud and not an actual software engineer, he had no idea how my code functioned on a fundamental, architectural level. He did not know that the core framework he stole was still actively fetching background routine updates from a dormant, hidden repository that only I controlled. I did not need to physically break into his office servers to destroy him. Sitting in my home office, sipping hot tea in the dead of night, I wrote a highly specialized security patch. It was a digital kill switch. It was entirely, unequivocally legal because it was my copyrighted, proprietary code. I embedded the fatal logic deep within the background update package. It was a silent, invisible time bomb, waiting patiently in the dark, completely undetectable until I decided to issue the final execution command. It was a Tuesday evening when Julian finally delivered the news he believed would secure his ultimate victory. He walked through the front door, his face flushed with arrogant triumph, carrying an absurdly expensive bottle of vintage champagne. "We did it, Nora," he announced, popping the cork and pouring 2 overflowing glasses. "We secured the lead venture capitalist, $5 million. We are hosting a massive, lavish signing gala this Saturday night at the downtown Grand Hotel. After this weekend, our family's life is going to change completely." I accepted the glass, the cool crystal perfectly steady in my grip. I smiled, a flawless, blinding display of wifely pride, and clinked my glass against his. "I am so incredibly proud of you, Julian," I said smoothly. "But I cannot make the gala. Dr. Evans scheduled a mandatory follow-up for Leo's immune panel this Saturday evening, and I promised him a movie marathon afterward if his blood counts are stable. You go, celebrate your hard work. You have earned every single bit of what is coming to you." He barely even tried to mask his profound relief. Having me absent meant Elena could freely play the role of the conquering business partner and adoring lover without my inconvenient, boring shadow ruining their grand celebration. Saturday morning arrived with a crisp, clear sky. As soon as Julian strutted out of the house in his brand new, custom-tailored tuxedo, smelling of expensive cologne and misplaced confidence, the final countdown officially began. I did not take my son to the pediatrician. My first stop was the Central Postal Facility. I dropped a thick, heavily documented, anonymous envelope directly into the priority mail chute. It was addressed straight to the Senior Fraud Investigation Division of our premium health insurance provider. Inside was a meticulously organized, devastating dossier detailing Julian's fraudulent listing of Mia, backed by time-stamped hospital records, forged intake forms, and irrefutable financial ledgers. Next, I sat in the driver's seat of my car and opened my encrypted laptop. I sent a single, one-word text message to my attorney. Victoria. The word was execute. Within 15 minutes, a massive, airtight intellectual property theft lawsuit was officially filed and processed in the Commercial District Court. Simultaneous to that brutal legal filing, a legally binding, extremely aggressive cease and desist mandate was securely transmitted directly to the executive partners of the venture capital firm funding Julian's startup. The legal notice explicitly detailed that the core software algorithm they were preparing to purchase was undeniably stolen property. It explicitly threatened the wealthy investors with immediate, catastrophic secondary liability if they proceeded with the $5 million wire transfer. I drove back to our Pinecrest home for one final sweep. I did not take the modern furniture, the expensive televisions, or the fine china. I only packed what truly mattered. 2 large suitcases filled with our clothes, Leo's favorite block sets, his essential medications, and every single irreplaceable family photograph that did not feature Julian's lying face. I loaded my bewildered but excited 7-year-old son into the car, telling him we were going on a surprise coastal vacation. We drove 3 solid hours away from the city, finally checking into a sprawling, high-security luxury resort right on the edge of the rugged Pacific Ocean. Once we were safely settled into our premium ocean view suite, I pulled my smartphone from my purse. I completely disabled the global positioning system tracking, turned off the cellular data, and placed it gently on the cool granite countertop. The invisible, digital bomb I had spent agonizing weeks building was now fully armed and locked. The structural supports of Julian's entire fake existence had been completely rigged with legal and financial explosives. Now, all I had to do was sit back, breathe in the salty ocean air, and wait for the devastating, unavoidable detonation. The ballroom of the downtown Grand Hotel was an opulent display of excessive corporate wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the wealthy attendees. Julian and Elena stood at the front of the massive room, bathed in the bright spotlight, looking exactly like the perfect visionary power couple they pretended to be. They had just finished their grand presentation. The lead investor, a stern-faced billionaire, held a heavy gold pen, hovering it right over the $5 million contract. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated the room with silver trays of vintage champagne. Julian raised his crystal flute, his chest puffed out with arrogant pride, ready to make his final toast to his brilliant, stolen success. Exactly at 8 o'clock, I executed the remote command from my laptop. In the ballroom, directly behind Julian, the massive 80-inch display screen running their live software demo suddenly glitched. The sleek, modern interface violently shattered into chaotic, broken lines of code. A loud, screeching error buzzer echoed through the premium sound system, silencing the entire room instantly. Then, the screen went completely black. A single, glowing red line of text appeared in the center of the massive display. It read, "Critical system failure. Unauthorized access of stolen proprietary architecture. Copyright registered to Nora Harris." Julian's arrogant smile collapsed. He frantically tapped his tablet, but the entire network was permanently bricked. Before he could even formulate a pathetic lie to save face, the lead investor's smartphone vibrated aggressively. It was the high-priority email from Victoria. The billionaire opened the encrypted attachment, his eyes scanning the aggressive legal mandate and the undeniable proof of intellectual property theft. The investor's face turned completely purple with absolute rage. He threw the gold pen onto the stage, grabbed the $5 million contract, and ripped it squarely in half. "You arrogant, fraudulent fools," the investor spat, his voice echoing in the dead silent room. "My legal team will annihilate you. I am suing you both for criminal misrepresentation and corporate fraud." As the venture capitalists stormed out of the ballroom, leaving Julian sweating and gasping for air, a man in a plain gray suit walked calmly through the heavy double doors. He bypassed the confused security guards, walked directly up to the stage, and shoved a thick, heavy manila envelope aggressively into Julian's trembling chest. "Julian Harris, you have been officially served," the man stated loudly, ensuring every single remaining guest heard him perfectly. Inside that heavy envelope was his absolute destruction, a petition for a hostile, at-fault divorce, a massive civil lawsuit for financial damages, and the most terrifying document of all, a federal summons from the Insurance Fraud Division. Panic consumed him. Julian pulled his phone from his pocket, his hands shaking so violently he dropped it twice. He dialed my number over and over, desperate to manipulate me, desperate for his safety net to catch him one last time. He only got my automated voicemail. Sweating through his custom tuxedo, he abandoned Elena in the lobby and drove frantically back to our Pinecrest house. When he arrived, he found the front door locked. He jammed his key into the deadbolt, but it would not turn. I had hired a locksmith that morning. He pulled out his phone to check his banking application, hoping to buy a hotel room or hire a criminal defense attorney. Access denied. A massive red banner informed him that every single joint financial account he possessed had been completely frozen by a federal court order. Pending a criminal investigation into the forged second mortgage, he was locked out of his stolen house, and he was completely, utterly broke. Elena arrived in a taxi an hour later. Julian ran to her, begging for help, begging to use her credit cards. But Elena was not a loyal partner. She was a parasite. The moment she realized Julian was no longer a wealthy tech founder, but a destitute criminal facing imminent federal prison time, the false affection vanished from her eyes. She looked at him with absolute disgust, turned around, got back into her taxi, and drove away without saying a single word. 200 miles away, the morning sun was rising over the beautiful Pacific Ocean. I sat on the spacious balcony of our luxury resort suite, a warm mug of premium coffee resting in my hands. The salty breeze felt incredibly clean, down on the sparkling white beach. My brave, wonderful son Leo was happily building a massive sandcastle, laughing as the gentle waves washed against the moat. He was safe. He was secure. My phone buzzed on the glass table. It was one final, desperate voicemail notification from Julian. I did not even listen to it. I calmly unlocked the screen, navigated to his contact profile, and hit delete. I watched his name vanish permanently into the digital void. A brand new chapter of my life was finally beginning. There was absolutely no room left for traitors, only the quiet, beautiful peace I had meticulously built from the burning ashes of my enemies. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this story today. Where in the world are you tuning in from? We would love to know. So please leave a comment below. If you found today's story entertaining and satisfying, please consider helping our channel with just a $1 donation. You can easily scan the QR code right on your screen, or use the donation link provided in the description and the pinned comment below. Your kindness allows us to pay our hardworking staff so they can feed their families and continue creating even better stories for you to enjoy. Thank you again, and have a truly wonderful day.